Hey you guys, welcome back. Let's talk about jealous friends. I feel like people oftentimes don't really understand that they even have someone in their life who's a friend that is jealous of them. There's kind of like these very obvious signs, don't get me wrong, but there are some things that people will do that are not so obvious and you don't realize that it's just coming from jealousy. And then you take it personally and then you react and it creates this whole drama that we just don't need to have. So let's talk about friends who are jealous, what you can do about it, signs, and all the good stuff. Let's get into it. First off, I want you to stay cool. I don't want you to overreact to the situation. Sometimes, depending on the type of personality that you have, people can get very defensive and very angry that a person is behaving in a way that stems jealousy. So they can get very bothered when someone's copying their style, when someone makes a comment, when someone does something. So this reactiveness that you have is not going to help anything. It's not going to get this person to not do these things. So please work on the ego. Try to come from a little bit more empathy to understand why this person is doing what they're doing. Understand that really jealousy all boils down to what? And we all know this, but sometimes people just tend to be very reactive to jealousy and they get very offended or upset by it. But jealousy has to do with what? Insecurity. What is this person insecure about? Quite frankly, themselves. They don't feel as though they're good enough, they're pretty enough, they're capable enough. They don't know who they are, and so they're constantly mirroring other people. So all of these things is what's going on inside of this person, which, by the way, this person has no idea. Most people aren't going to say, you know what, I'm an extremely jealous and insecure person, so let me work on that. That doesn't usually happen, especially when you're dealing with friends. So the first thing, I want you to avoid attack mode. I want you to avoid getting defensive. I want you to really work on that ego, because everything that you're going to do and say coming from that space is not going to help the situation. It's not going to get this person to have this aha moment and recognize that they're actually an insecure person and work on themselves. It's only going to make them be even more defensive. I know maybe some people don't want to operate from this space, but I have to be honest, you really working your empathy piece or empathy card is going to be extremely important, because what it does is it helps you to really put yourself into that person's shoes and understand why they are the way they are. And when you understand why a person is the way they are, you tend to have that empathy and compassion for the person. And in that space where you're living in the empathy and compassion, the ego can't really live. So if I'm coming from that space, I'm understanding why you are the way you are. I'm not taking something personally. When I'm coming from the ego, all the ego is doing is actually just taking everything personally, which causes the ego to be reactive to this person, which of course escalates a situation. Now, depending on the situation and the person, you could possibly sit down and have a chat with them and come from how you feel, but you have to be able to do that in the healthiest way possible. Telling a person that basically you think that they're insecure and that they're copying you or jealous of you, and that's why they're making these comments or doing these things or saying these things, it may not always be receptive. So you want to make sure that if you are going to have a conversation with anyone, then it definitely needs to be a person that you think has some level of self-awareness to take responsibility for themselves. That's first and foremost. A person who displays jealous or insecurities, that type of behavior, can possibly be excessively praising. So this is a person that overly wants to make sure you're okay, overly gives you the compliments, is just very excessive and just wants everyone to like them, or wants specifically you to like them. Now, why do they want you so badly to like them? Well, they're probably insecure around you. You probably display a level of confidence, or you have something about you that they do admire or they want to be like. And so instead of like making hurtful comments, maybe they're just like overly praising, overly aggressive towards you, overly talkative, those types of things that really, not every person is going to be a little overly talkative or praising is an insecure person, but there is a line between just being a kind, nice person that will say things that are very lovely versus overly doing it. And you can spot that stuff a mile away. You can spot the difference between someone who's just like healthy and saying something nice and complimenting you and praising you in that way, and someone who does it excessively. Number two, for a jealous person, you're going to receive these backhanded compliments. And I think sometimes these are really hard to spot. Maybe not. Maybe sometimes they're not that hard to spot, but a lot of the times they are. And this is where you're getting the beginning statement is a compliment, and then the end of the statement is just this kind of like little subtle dig. So for example, someone might say something like, "You're so lucky to have such an easy job. I wish I had it as easy as you do." Now, of course, no one has it easy. There's always things that everyone is struggling with. This person is just probably feeling a little insecure, a little jealous of the fact that you have something that they would want, and it's something that they perceive would look different than what you see it as. Maybe you think that your job is easy, but you know that it's not easy all the time, every day, that you do work your tail off. And so while the job might look glamorous or look a certain way to this person, you know that it's not easy to do what you do. Number three, you're always going to deal with the one-upping. This is the person that always needs to feel as though that they're better. So if you're talking about your accomplishments or your day or something that you've gone through, this person is going to talk about themselves and how what they went through was even worse than what you went through. Or you accomplished this, well, they accomplished this. And this can be that even sometimes narcissistic tendency where I just have to feel better about myself. When you feel good about yourself, I also need to feel good about myself. And it's this constant competition of who's doing better than the other, who knows more than the other, who's achieving more than the other. If you've ever been told that you're an old soul, then guess what? You know when someone is doing this. You will get that little intuition, that little something inside of you that's saying, why is this a competition? Why is this? Because you're coming from an authentic place, and this person is actually just coming from their own insecurities. And you can smell that stuff a mile away if you slow down to see what's happening and not be so reactive to this person. This is a big one. Number four, copying your actions. Someone who is always mirroring you, copying your style, copying how you act and respond, all of those things. Why does someone do that? That has to do with, honestly, just not having a sense of self, not knowing who you are, that you feel as though you need to look like someone else, be something else. You don't know how to articulate yourself. You don't know how to communicate in an authentic way, from everything, from how you write to how you speak, to what you look like, all of those things. Now, don't get me wrong, there's another person wearing this shirt. There's another person that probably has this kind of hair. There's another person that maybe did their makeup the same as mine, and a person that has this ring. So that's not, it's one thing to look at something and say, oh, I like that. But it's another thing to look at someone in particular and want to be like that in its entirety. So you can look at someone and say, I really like their character, I admire that, I want to be like that, or I would like to be more like that. But usually when you do those things or say these things or see the shirt, you're picking all of these little things out of society and conforming them into you. You're saying, this is, I like this, I like that kind of character, I want to be that kind of person, but you're taking bits and pieces. You're not looking at a whole thing and trying to just emulate it. Those are, I feel like, sometimes the subtle, maybe not as obvious things, aside from the mirroring. I think that's sometimes very obvious and we know when someone's doing it. But let's talk about the things that are maybe a little bit more hurtful, where possibly your ego can really get triggered and you can actually get really defensive and overreact when a person does these things. The first thing is when someone minimizes your success or doesn't celebrate you in the way that you would possibly celebrate them. A good friend is going to mirror the way you love, the way it's just going to be the kindred spirit that's healthy and secure, and you both are, and you have a great relationship. Any success you have is just like an explosion to this person, just like it would be to you if they were succeeding in any way. That right there is healthy back and forth in a relationship where I'm so incredibly proud of you, you're so incredibly proud of me, we're not jealous of each other, we're not in competition of each other. So anyone who you don't feel that level of excitement, usually has that insecurity going on inside of them that possibly you're somewhere where they're not, you have something that they don't, and it all kind of goes back to that person and how they feel. People that can really judge a lot or be very criticizing, it's really has to do with their own insecurities, their own jealousies that they feel inside of themselves. There's something about you that they're not. And so when people make these backhanded compliments, when they're passive aggressive, when they do all these types of things that you can be very reactive to, sometimes it's hard to see that what's happening is you're just dealing with a person who's severely insecure. You're dealing with a person that on some levels is jealous of you because you represent something that they don't have or someone that they're not. And they do know this, but they know this in an unconscious way. They're not consciously aware of these things to take responsibility for them. They're just making excuses in their own head for their behavior when really it just has to do with their own feelings of not being good enough. When you understand it that way, then it's easy to see why you could learn how to not take things personally. When you don't see it that way, then you're going to be reactive when a person does these things or says these things, and you're going to do what you've always done, which is just respond in a negative way. You're not going to be calm. You're not going to be confident. You're not going to hold on to yourself. You're going to be passive aggressive, probably yourself. You're going to get defensive. The ego is going to win. And that's what we're trying not to do. We're trying to learn the signs of what is this person? What are the things that they do to me that trigger me, that actually just show that they're insecure or jealous of me, and how can I respond differently? I think understanding this person a little bit more and having that little bit of empathy will really help. I think you making a decision that I'm going to stop coming from that egoic space. I want to come from my healthy self. I want to understand this person and even myself. Why am I so triggered that this person is jealous or insecure of me? When they do these things, why do I just let them get under my skin in that way? That's the stuff that has to do with you that you need to tend to, because if you don't, you're just going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. And chances are, if you're watching this video, you're trying not to do the same things over and over again. So like I said in the beginning of the video, if the person is somewhat able to take responsibility for themselves, maybe you can have an open and honest conversation. Maybe you can tell this person how you're feeling. If not, and you feel as though that conversation may not go over well, or maybe you did have it and it didn't go over well, then possibly even just setting boundaries with this person is going to be enough. And the boundaries doesn't have to be a verbal conversation with this person. Maybe you just slowly distance yourself, away from that relationship just a little bit. Don't make it so obvious, where you can get some space and maybe you won't be as triggered by this person when you have that little bit of distance. This is really all about you. It's not about this person. It's about you learning how to deal with how you feel. It's about having more self-care when you are around this person, more empathy, and learning how to come from those spaces versus that ego. So I hope you guys that this video has helped you. Comment down below who is the person in your life that you feels as though might be a little insecure and jealous of you, and in what way do they show you that? So comment down below. I would love to hear from you guys. If you're interested in working with me, I always link everything down below, and I will see you in next week's video. Take care, guys.